so welcome to another episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative. Today I have a very special guest with me, the Uruguayan-born Mr. Luis Gabriel Rojo. Luis, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Derek. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you being here, man. I think we're gonna have a really awesome conversation. You're my first guest from Uruguay, so that's a cause for celebration.
So I was born in Montevideo, Uruguay,
Hmm.
and my father, who was born, is from Spain. He's from
Hmm.
La Coruña region of Spain.
Hmm.
He's actually from a village that is called Fonto des Bois, which is not even on the map.
Hmm.
It's just his family. It's like really
Yeah.
old school. So my dad immigrated to Uruguay when he was 23. You know,
Mm.
kind of like a lot of people from Spain during the dictatorship and because of poverty,
Yeah.
they immigrated to Argentina and Uruguay. A
Mm.
lot of them.
Nice.
In that time, it was prosperous in Uruguay and Argentina in the 40s and 50s.
Okay.
So, and there he met my mom and had me and my sister. And then, ironically, another dictatorship fell in Uruguay.
Hmm.
Dad left again. He got an opportunity to come here. An Italian like my dad was a taxi driver. Another Italian taxi driver told him, "Let's go. I have an opportunity." My dad was like, "Okay, I'll go with you."
Right.
Sold their taxis and came to Washington D.C. And my dad was here for a year by himself, and then that was 1974, and then he brought us, me and my sister, and my mom, in 1975,
Mm.
and that was our story of how we got here.
Nice, nice. So when you came to America, you came straight to DC?
Actually, that's a good question. What happened was we came to Wheaton, Maryland,
Mm.
and because we actually knew people there from Uruguay,
Nice.
there were some
Yeah.
Uruguayans there that we knew, and so we stayed with them for like a few months when we
Okay.
first got here. And then my dad got a job as a chauffeur,
Hmm.
and that's why we moved to DC because he got a job in an embassy in DC, in the Venezuelan embassy. He worked for the Venezuelan embassy for 13 years.
Mm.
And he worked for the Brazilian embassy for like 35 years, something like that, as a chauffeur.
Okay.
I'm fortunate that my dad, kind of got into that niche and ran with it, and was
Yeah.
very good at that at his job.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. And it's interesting because as a kid, I lived in Wheat. All right. And I know there's like a lot of, in talking to you, man, like a lot of our stories kind of just like we just, but there are a lot of parallels.
Crazy. It really is.
Yeah. So, yeah. So the whole time that I went to high school, I lived in Wheaton, essentially.
So you know where we lived. We lived in those garden apartments on the corner of Randolph and Georgia.
Hmm.
They're behind that fire station
Yep. Absolutely.
corner, and then behind there, there's a huge complex of garden
Yep.
apartments that are really
Yep.
they look janky now, but they were nicer in 1974, 1975.
Yeah, I bet. I bet they were pristine. And I went to Kennedy, so I literally drove by those apartments every day going to high school.
And actually we went to Glenmont Elementary,
Hmm.
1975, 76.
Hmm.
If I can just kind of jump into the education thing,
Yeah.
as that was like one of my early traumas. Like as
Mm.
all immigrants just naturally have traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
The process itself is a trauma.
Absolutely.
But one of the what happened there was this was 1975, so bilingual education hadn't even come to Montgomery County yet.
Hmm.
It was in DC. It was at Oyster Elementary, was one of
Mm.
the first bilingual education programs in the country.
Right.
So, but it was nowhere near, going into Maryland. So Glenmont Elementary, of course, there was no one there that spoke Spanish.
Mm.
So I must have been 5 or 6, and the entire year I was there, I just sat there,
Yeah, yeah.
and just I remember just kids like kind of looking at me, staring, laughing and stuff,
Hmm.
and I remember feeling like, really scared, first of
Yeah.
all,
Hmm.
uncertain, but I felt like a prop, I felt like like a show and tell thing.
Yeah, yeah,
They were trying, I could also tell they were trying to be empathetic, the teachers and stuff, and
yeah.
they were trying to be nice, but
Hmm.
they really had no idea what they were doing,
Right, right.
um, in retrospect. And it really was, you know, it was tough, but I learned English, I
Yeah.
learned it took about 6 months, but when you're that young, you're so resilient and smart,
Hmm.
you're
Yeah,
able, to make it happen. But it was definitely not a pleasant experience at all.
yeah, yeah,
It's weird because it was such a benign. I mean, that neighborhood and that place. I mean, it was a very benign time. It was a very benign
yeah.
community there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Nothing really happened there very much at that time.
Yeah.
Things got crazy in the '80s. Things
Right.
things went sideways, but at that time it was still pretty chill.
Yeah. No, that's thank you for sharing that with us, man, because I think especially the language component, and this is a recurring theme as I'm having interviews with folks who are non-English speakers from birth and coming to America, like that transition piece, especially it's tough, right? Because if again, if there's no one, if you're not lucky enough to have a polyglot in your school, someone who's, fluent in multiple languages, then it's really tough. And in your time, we're talking about the 70s. So like again, bilingual education, ESL is not fully, you know, in place to really support you. So going through that, so when your parents enrolled you in the school and you're going through that, even though you learned English in about 6 months, you're literally still going home every day and coming right back to the same environment where you're not really properly supported.
Right.
So were your parents aware that this is kind of what your days look like?
No, they had no idea. Like,
Yeah.
my parents, you know, God bless them. They're just, you know, neither. My dad studied until the fourth grade. He
Hmm.
stopped going to school. He started working when he was like nine
Hmm.
or something.
Yeah.
So this is like Civil War, Spanish Civil War era, times. And my mother never went, never finished high school. So
Hmm.
they're very intelligent people, but they don't have any formal education. They don't
Right.
have any formal education, and so they just kind of were just doing the best they could, trying to make the best decisions they could, but they were really winging it,
Yeah.
relying on other people's like, feedback and advice.
Yeah. And is your sister at Glenmont with you? Are you older than your sister?
Yeah, she was there too.
Hmm.
It's funny, I've never really asked her about her experience, but I remember her early academic experience was a lot better than mine.
Hmm.
A lot of, she had a lot, she had an easier time in
Yeah.
school. I think it was because she developed really fast.
Hmm.
She grew up really fast, like her
Yeah.
mind, her body, everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird,
Yeah.
like 5'2", maybe 5'1", but she was that tall when she was like real young.
Yeah.
She was like a giant.
Yeah.
But now she grew a little,
Yeah. Yeah.
but she learned how to speak really fast, and she learned so school was easier for her at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was it that helped you sort of progress relatively quickly to learn English in 6 months? Like what were some things that you did?
I don't remember, but I
Yeah.
think it was just that whole dynamic where children can just learn language really fast.
Hmm.
I think whatever that was.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that 100% of the education was in English at that time, so it was sink or swim for you basically.
It was the fire pot, the firing pan, whatever.
Yeah.
There's
You
something,
was,
yeah, and I mean, there's something to be said for that too.
yeah.
It's like immigrants. will adapt. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, they're going to experience a lot of bumps,
Yeah.
along the way. So
Right.
bilingual education for me is just how do we mitigate those bumps,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's
And you lived it and you understand it. You know what I mean?
yeah, I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hey man, it is what it is, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, no. I appreciate you sharing that story. So where'd you go to high school?
So then we moved to DC,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up going to this elementary school called Brightwood Elementary.
Mm-hmm.
And then we used a fake address
Mm-hmm.
so I could go to Alice Deal and Woodrow
Yeah.
Wilson.
Gotcha.
Just,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
and I have mixed thoughts about that. I think
Yeah.
it was good that I was lucky to be able to
Mm-hmm.
go to Deal and Wilson. I know it's like a privilege, those are good, high performing schools.
Right.
But every now and then I wonder what would have happened if I stayed and I went to Brightwood, which is at that time 90% black,
Yeah.
and then if I went to Roosevelt, if I went to
Mm-hmm.
uh, Paul, at that time it was Paul Junior High School, and then
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know what would my life have been like? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
never know, but
Yeah.
could have been.
So growing up, were you so once you guys moved to DC, you had a family in Wheaton that you guys stayed with. So how big was the Uruguayan community back then? Like did you guys get together for for dinners? Like how was the community?
That's a good question, man. Well, Uruguay is only a country of 3 million people,
Hmm.
so the entire country.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be any big populations of Uruguayans anywhere, really.
Yeah.
But except in Uruguay,
Yeah.
But we also had some other friends. My dad had like a childhood friend who's from Spain
Mm-hmm.
who also lived in Uruguay. My dad used to joke her name was Carmen, that he's been following Carmen his whole life
Yeah.
because I grew up in Galicia, but then Carmen came to Washington D.C. Then my dad
Mm-hmm.
came to Washington D.C.
Mm-hmm.
No, no, Carmen went to Uruguay. Then
Mm-hmm.
my dad went to Uruguay, and Carmen came to Washington D.C. And then my dad came to Washington D.C.
Yeah.
We're best friends, like basically. But my mom, who was a very jealous woman,
Mm-hmm.
she eventually we eventually stopped hanging out. But for a while there, we used to we had a little community that we created.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, it was beautiful, man. It was
Yeah.
I'll never forget those times were
Yeah.
special.
Yeah.
Special times we get together for Christmas and events and even like and I remember when we first got here, we used to go to church, even though we're like
Mm-hmm.
essentially non-believers,
Mm-hmm.
sort of culturally Catholics.
Yeah.
Started going to this church called Our Lady of Lourdes
Mm-hmm.
on Old Georgetown Road, Bethesda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was a Spanish church back there. So anyway, so for a few years, for several years, we lived this very typical sort of immigrant, creating little communities for themselves to hang out during, children's being together, going to church. We kind of leaned on that. My parents leaned on that as
Mm-hmm.
support. You know,
Yeah.
it was literally the best thing they did, the best thing they could have done.
Yeah.
Then when we moved to DC, and I started going, then things we got away from that.
Mm-hmm.
That was unfortunate a little bit.
Yeah.
That happened, and but that's what happened.
Yeah.
If we had stayed in Montgomery County, I think things would have been a lot different.
Yeah.
It's not better or worse, but
Yeah.
the way that we use that social support and that sort of typical immigrant Latino model,
Mm-hmm.
was great. And
Yeah.
young child, that really provided me a lot of uh, support that I
Right.
I really longed for and I really loved.
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
had Uruguay. In Uruguay, I was like in heaven, man. You know,
Yeah.
as a child, I was so happy. You know,
Yeah.
so I think you know, I really missed that about Uruguay. You know, having a lot of
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
culture and want that. You know, pretty much. Um,
Yeah.
but that kind of changed a little bit when I moved to DC in a different.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I think you're touching on some things, right? You're touching on some traumas, multiple traumas, right? And one of the things like America's referred to as a melting pot, and this theory that I've been kind of just mulling over is that within that melting pot, there's trauma that's also infused in that melting pot, right? Because so you guys are leaving Uruguay kind of like for political reasons, but you're a child, you're being uprooted from everything you love and everything you know, then you're thrusted into America where you're supposed to have, we're here for a better opportunity, a better life. Then you're enrolled in a school where there's no system in place to really facilitate your transition, right? So it's like you've been uprooted, that's one trauma. Then now you're just pushed into this other system where you're just here by yourself trying to figure out, what's going on. And I think a lot of times, we overlook those things, right? But it speaks to the resiliency that you talked about, which is sort of embedded in just the human experience, the immigrant experience also, specifically, where you have to just adapt and be resilient. You know what I mean? You just keep going, you keep putting one foot in front of the other. So in that vein, as you guys move to DC, you're figuring things out. Like, who are your close friends, when you're in, let's say elementary, middle school, high school? Like, who are your friends? Are you finding friends who culturally you guys have some similar backgrounds? Like, how are you navigating, that circle?
So, what happened with me is, well, first of all, what happened was my dad got a job at the Venezuelan delegation.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the embassy. And
Mm-hmm.
the delegation at that time was physically in this big house
Mm-hmm.
on 16th Street by 16th
Mm-hmm.
Military Road.
Mm-hmm.
And the arrangement was that our family would live in the house in the
Mm-hmm.
basement.
Yeah.
My father was the chauffeur, and he was kind of like also the housekeep. Like he would like keep the lawn,
Yeah.
cut, clean, and everything. And then my mother, and then basically we would also clean. So my mother would
Mm-hmm.
help clean it and
Yeah.
clean the offices. So it was like a big mansion, and the rooms were like offices.
Mm-hmm.
So we grew up, and back then, 16th Street was kind of like the dividing line. You know how DC is very segregated.
Absolutely.
So everything uh, east of 16th, which for people now, it's like they can't even fathom that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Every like 16th Street, right when you cross the other side of 16th Street, it was
Mm-hmm.
all black people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and also it was a lot of middle class black people too, because
Mm-hmm.
those were middle class neighborhoods around there,
Mm-hmm.
big houses and stuff.
Right.
But then west of 16th Street, where the Rock Creek Park is, and then and you go up, that's where things change.
Right.
And so we lived there. So next door to us were these white families, on both sides. And we became very close friends with both them and their kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so I grew up in a very neighborhoody. I had
Yeah.
the, I did have another advantage, uh, Derek, which was I grew up in like a neighborhood environment in my house,
Mm-hmm. Right.
so I could just go out in the street. I come home, I just go out in the street and just play
Yeah.
all day, all night. My dad like screaming at me to come home,
Yeah.
and like at night, and but all my friends were black and white, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and so I didn't really have Latino friends really like that,
Yeah.
were mainly black and white,
Yeah.
and and also I looked very white.
Yeah.
I've been through a transition. Like now I look like a person of color. I shaved my head and I grew my
Yeah,
beard.
yeah, yeah.
You know, but
Welcome home, man.
I looked, but the way I looked was I looked like Chachi from Happy Days.
Yeah, yeah,
I looked like a little Italian kid.
yeah,
I had no facial hair, very skinny. And I'm half
yeah,
Spanish,
yeah,
so so I easily passed. I didn't even
yeah,
know what passing was. I just
yeah, yeah,
my life. You know what I mean? As a
yeah,
child,
yeah,
but I just basically. But then at the same time, I looked white, but I acted, but I naturally identified to the dominant culture, which was black.
yeah,
I'm saying,
yeah,
so, my teacher my first teacher I had a crush on was black.
yeah,
First girls I had a crush on were black. Like
yeah,
Michael Jackson, like
yeah,
was it. Like I was in that. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Don't fight it.
no, it was great.
Yeah,
I benefited from that. That was
yeah,
like
man.
that was like that was like heaven too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know. I didn't have any at that time. I was not conscious
Yeah,
of race and social justice. Although in the '70s in DC, it was like, oh my God, like I was learning about Malcolm X in elementary school. You
right,
know,
right. Yeah,
like Black History Month was like Black History Month. Like
yeah,
it was like we were learning a lot of different. I remember Matthew Henson was my favorite famous person because I used to like drawing his that hood, when he made the
yeah,
hole.
yeah,
So I grew up like that, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And it was really beautiful. There were
yeah,
a lot of beautiful things about it, because DC was really, I tell people that was a golden period in DC, like post civil rights and before the crack epidemic, you know,
mm-hmm.
which was
Yeah,
it was about 10 years at least.
yeah, yeah,
And Marion Barry, came
yeah,
out really
yeah,
good, you know.
yeah. So this
Uh,
was the calm before the storm.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
It was a calm for the storm. I benefited greatly, and at the same time, I was struggling as an immigrant.
yeah,
My identity with my pot with poverty.
yeah,
Domestic violence in my family.
yeah,
So I was struggling at home a lot,
yeah,
but but you know, um, but it was a nice environment in a lot of ways.
yeah,
For a child.
yeah,
It would have been much easier if I was from here, and would have
yeah, yeah,
white or black,
yeah,
would have been a lot easier because I didn't really fit in. Like weird things would happen. Like I remember being at Brightwood and like we talked about slavery a lot,
yeah,
and like some kids would like turn and look at me, when like they were
yeah.
saying these negative things about slave masters,
Right, right, right.
whatever,
You're
and
like,
they
I'm from Uruguay. I had nothing to do with this.
totally like it was so confusing. I'm like, what? I'm like,
Yeah,
but the teacher, but what I remember is the teacher would say that, the
yeah,
teacher would kind of like, they loved me. Like
yeah,
the, the, the faculty and the
yeah,
administration, right, would love me and my sister.
yeah,
They
yeah,
treat give us special treatment. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Um, and so they would like, but there was always these awkward things.
yeah. Absolutely.
I didn't fit in anywhere. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I still don't fit in really.
yeah, yeah,
But but at least now it's like it's all about diversity and inclusion and
yeah,
that stuff to me is like is like air.
yeah,
I feel like I feel a lot better
yeah.
identity now. But
Absolutely, man.
back then it was very black and white, very
Yeah, yeah,
that narrative. You know what I'm saying? Was like the dominant narrative.
absolutely.
I didn't fit in that at all. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah,
just became something else. Identified as
yeah,
There was a period there where literally I felt like like I was black. Like I wanted to
yeah,
be
yeah,
not so little. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
I was so jealous. I was like jealous of
yeah,
like of the real popular boys. It was like self-hatred, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think it's, and I think there's a lot of irony in that, right? Because it's like,
Totally.
you don't really see yourself represented in the broader culture. You know what I mean? Like being a kid from Uruguay, you come here in the 70s, and I'm sure most Americans at that point, are probably like, "Where's Uruguay?" You know what I mean? So identity, language, culture, like all these things that you're adjusting to on the fly, and it's all just part of survival. Like, how do I survive and just keep going? You know what I mean? And you guys are doing this as a family, right? But then you and your sister also have to get up every day and go into a system, the American education system that your parents haven't navigated. You know what I mean? So both you and your sisters are like literally the first ones in the family to be educated in, like American schools, all right? And that's a feat in itself, especially when your parents haven't been through it and they're not really sure how to prepare you. So y'all are literally, both of y'all are canaries in the coal mine, you know, just going through that.
And I thought you were going to say also what was ironic about it was that we ended up in like at the time maybe the only like predominantly black city
Yeah,
entire United States.
yeah,
I'm saying so where whites are white people are the vast majority
yeah.
and blacks are a minority, you know,
Hmm.
big minority, like smaller than now. Well, no,
Yeah,
maybe not smaller than now, but they're very much a minority. But for us, they were the majority.
absolutely.
I'm saying,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's dope though, right? Because especially with the Uruguayan component, right? Like coming from Uruguay and coming to Washington D.C., which is affectionately referred to as Chocolate City, like that's it's a nice baptism, you know what I mean, to something different. And then you're talking about it more so from on a national scale, where the majority of cities in America are predominantly white, but then you get to D.C.
right,
and DC's Chocolate City, you know what I mean? And this is like your introduction to America in a sense.
right, totally.
Yeah, yeah,
My parent, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not proud of it. My parents were worried about it. They were kind of like
yeah,
freaked, a little bit freaked
yeah.
out.
Naturally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, my dad tells a story where he lived with a black Euro, that they're Afro Uruguayos, as you know,
Hmm. Yeah.
they're a very small population. But my dad lived with um, when he first moved to Spain and he lived on his own. He rented a room
Hmm.
and this Afro Uruguayan couple.
Hmm.
They were like his parent. He was like they treated me like their son,
Hmm.
and like they helped him a lot, and they helped each other. My dad was,
Yeah.
and he was like when he left the house, like they were crying, like
Yeah. Yeah.
they were crying. My dad was crying. It was like
Yeah.
they're like really close.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dope when he told me that.
Yeah. Yeah, man. No, I think that's it's such a beautiful story, man. There's a lot of pain, there's trauma, there's joy. Like this, like your story literally just encompasses like the full like immigrant experience, man. From all different angles, like in all depths and hills and valleys, peaks and everything. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Um, so as you're going through, so let's talk about your high school years because I want to also get to, to the work that you do and tie all this into basically your experience and the wonderful work that you do currently and how it all sort of prepared you for the work that you do. Um, so as you're going through high school, well, let's talk about Deal and Wilson a little bit. You know what I mean? Because this is both of these schools. This is Deal's a middle school, Wilson's a high school, and they're both west of Rock Creek Park, in a more upscale neighborhood of Washington D.C. So what was your experience like at Deal and at Wilson?
Well, first of all, my academic experience was um, I did it was terrible because
Hmm.
I must have had some learning disabilities
Hmm.
and that were undiagnosed, because they didn't even do that back then. And
Right.
um, I'm sure I'm undiagnosed ADHD,
Right.
all that. So how
Hmm.
I got through it was, but at the same time, I was kind of smart, I
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
like, because I always remember like when I actually studied, I
Yeah.
remember like I would do pretty well, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
I would always be surprised. Like I'd get the
yeah,
test back, like, oh my God, a B, like a
yeah,
minus. But
yeah,
that would happen very rarely.
yeah, yeah,
Very rarely.
yeah.
Uh, so I did a lot of like just, and my parents, they never checked my grades, they never checked
Yeah.
my homework card. They never came to school to parent teacher conferences, very rarely.
Mm-hmm.
They were intimidated,
Yeah.
and so I just basically got away with murder,
Right.
what I wanted.
Yeah.
I
You're like,
basically,
everything's great. Don't worry about it.
yeah, I basically did what I wanted, and I went
Yeah.
wherever I wanted to, and
Yeah.
because my parents were like, that's just the way they thought it was okay.
Yeah.
Um, so I ended up just being a really not, below average student,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't uncommon to get D's and F's.
Yeah.
Um, so academically it was not good. I
Yeah.
did a bunch of cheating, a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
copying
Yeah.
stuff, encyclopedia, just
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so but the way I think a lot of immigrants do is the way I coped was by just being super social,
Mm-hmm.
by being really funny, you know,
Yeah.
and and also just sort of being really like the fun guy,
Yeah.
and then like the girls were really into me.
Yeah.
I was like super flirtatious and all that.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I played sports, I played tennis. I was on the
Mm-hmm.
tennis team, I was on the soccer team.
Mm-hmm.
I played basketball all the time. That was my sport,
Yeah.
basketball. I played for the school, tennis and soccer.
Yeah.
I love was basketball.
Yeah.
And I would play pickup constantly and just like epic
Yeah.
wars.
Yeah.
So so I had a lot of fun, man. I had a lot of
Yeah.
fun, and I get in trouble too though at school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just dumb stuff,
Yeah.
coming late, skipping school, just
Yeah.
ridiculous. But so it was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
I had and again, I had white friends, I had black friends,
Yeah.
I didn't have Latino friends.
Yeah.
My parents, one thing I'm somewhat ashamed of, and somewhat, you know, is my parents when I was young kind of put in my mind this sort of racist idea that like we were not Central American.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were South American.
Yeah. Yeah.
To put it in language that people understand, we were criollos, we're Creole.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're like Euro Latinos. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we're different. Yeah, you know about
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
soccer and stuff.
Yeah.
And also, you're from the Caribbean has
Yeah. Hell
these
yeah. It's the same. It's the same thing, man. You have a lot of that.
this colonization stuff is terrible.
Yeah. Yeah,
Our
man.
hang up, our hang up is colonization. Not
Yeah.
not slavery. Even though
Yeah.
slavery was in there too, but
Yeah.
it was distant. But so so as a result, I just never really my parents made a point of never living in. My parents would have never lived in Mount Pleasant,
Yeah.
or where all the Latinos were.
Yeah.
They were like, we would never live there. We never
Yeah.
want to. We don't want to
And
hang out.
and most of those Latinos are from Central America
Right, at that time,
at the
they
time. At that time.
started to transition,
Yeah.
because before the Central Americans came, because of their civil wars, there were a lot of Europeans there.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of Italians,
Yeah.
Russians, and they were like
Mm-hmm.
Spanish.
Yeah.
But that changed. That switched over.
Yeah. But that's interesting, man, and I appreciate you sharing that. I think there's a lot of that sort of I guess I don't know if you'd call it geopolitical, but it's a lot of that happens, right? I think that sort of stuff happens in the Caribbean, it happens in Africa, it happens in, South Americans versus Central Americans. It's just and it is a remnant of colonization. You know what I mean? To think that we're not like them. We're different from them. You
Right.
know what I mean?
And it's also, and it's even. I'm glad you said that it's in Africa and Asia and everywhere because it
Yeah.
is. But there's
Yeah.
other components of it too. Like for example, the Dominicans and Puerto Ricans,
Yeah. Yeah.
the Haitians, you know,
Yeah. Absolutely.
the Venezuelans, Colombians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah, man. It's a
but
lot
it's,
of it there. And
some of
it stems from colonization. You know what I mean? It's
some
just
of it is
it's that
geographic.
mindset.
Though.
Yeah.
It's also othering. It's the other. You know,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
race is one component.
Yeah.
It's also other components. And
Mm-hmm.
some of it's just like you're over there and I'm here.
Exactly.
Where I'm from is better than where from you're from.
Yeah. I'm not like you.
Right.
And you're not like me. Yeah. It is the other end. I like how you said that. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And it's a lot of irony, right? It's just we're all on planet Earth, and then we just still find ways to divide ourselves.
Right. And
You
just
know?
race, class, and
Yeah,
all it just snowballs,
yeah, yeah,
nationality,
yeah,
which I'm really anti-nationality, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Because I've seen how much nationality just divides us, you know.
yeah,
Latinos are so pro,
yeah,
nationality, but like secretly,
yeah,
I'm like, I hate it, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah, because even within that, it's problematic, right? Like you talked about the Afro-Uruguayan, that's your dad family that your dad stayed with. Um, so like even within that country, just the same way you didn't really feel. When you came to America and you came to DC specifically, it was like black and white. And, you said it would have been different if you were born here, right? You kind of would have fit in a little bit, it would have been a lot more seamless for you.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing in a lot of countries where there are people who are born in that country. Even in America, there are black Americans who don't feel American, you know?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't feel like I'm from anywhere.
yeah,
That's my newest thing. My newest thing is I and it feels good, like
yeah,
to really acknowledge the fact that I don't feel Uruguayan.
yeah,
I don't feel like I'm from the United States of America.
yeah,
I don't feel like I'm from Spain.
yeah. You're
Like
from Earth, man.
I'm from Earth. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
That's the I, I'm wrapping my head. I enjoy this exercise of wrapping my head around the idea that this is, planet Earth,
hmm
and we're just these creatures
yeah,
on this planet.
yeah.
We've made up all these things, meaning to put, but it's all meaningless, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
I look at it from, a meta,
Yeah,
analysis, and we're just these creatures here, man, just trying to
yeah, man.
survive.
Finding ways to divide, each other. That's kind of what we do.
It's a refreshing when I think about it like that.
Yeah,
I get this like good feeling, man, of just like
yeah,
I can breathe, I can
yeah,
just take a breath, just be like, I'm okay. Nothing's wrong
yeah,
with
yeah. So let me ask you this, man. I want to talk real quily about the parenting aspect. I know you're a wonderful father. I had a chance to, have dinner with you and your son. Um, So how did all like your experiences, right? And it's so interesting, man. If you look at your dad's experience, like going from Spain to Uruguay and then coming to America, and then also your experience, right? Like leaving Uruguay, coming to America, and now you have a son, right? So you have your dad, then there's you, and then now there's your son. Like, how has all that shaped you as a father? Like, how have those experiences shaped you? Like, specifically your experience, like growing up in America, like, how has that helped you to sort of be in tune with your son and kind of understand a lot of the things that he's dealing with as he, kind of makes it through life?
I know his experience is different than mine, obviously,
Definitely.
but I try to share with him as much as I can because I feel like him knowing our story and our family story, it's good to know who you are and where you come from.
Hmm.
Also, I also hope it gives them inspiration. You know what I'm saying? Because our children are and they're growing up with such incredible privilege, you know,
Hmm.
and resources that it's good for them to hear how like people before them, fought, you know, and struggled
Yeah.
to get, what we have here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in the history, I try to tell them about all the history of the United States stuff.
Yeah.
So for me, that's really what it is. I don't
Yeah.
want to much of a thing, you know. I'm trying to let my son have his own experience, you know, because
Yeah.
a bit of a dad that like I'm a little bit preachy, you know.
Yeah.
You know how dads can be sometimes.
Guilty, guilty. I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, I'm a bit preachy. I'm a bit, I'm trying to be a little more hands off, you know, these
Yeah.
days. But because you worry too, you know, you worry and technology, of course, and social media is it's a whole another animal that we didn't deal with, and
Yeah.
that's such a negative thing, you know.
Hmm.
What was great about growing up in the time that we grew up, you know, they don't get a lot of that stuff, you know,
Hmm.
and it's unfortunate. So that's
Yeah.
worth. But I don't know, Derek.
Yeah.
I'm just more about storytelling and sharing.
Yeah.
Let him have that information and do what he want with it. You know, I don't really know what his experience is like.
Yeah.
It's different, and I knew it was going to be like that. But his generation, I mean, they're just having a very different experience than than ours. He's not an immigrant, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so he's going to have a different conceptualization of his identity. You know,
Absolutely.
but I want to say one more thing because we jumped over one thing that I want to mention, which is that so after high school, I went to the army
Mm.
because the recruiter came to Wilson.
Hmm.
Just were like, go talk to the recruiter. To me, they were like, go talk to the recruiter.
Yeah. They're like you over there.
So that's how I got into the army, and
Yeah.
it was great, man.
Yeah.
It was a big, you know, kick in the ass. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But like they say, when you get kicked, the expression in Spanish, when you get kicked in the ass, you move
Yeah.
forward. You go forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I
It's a
got
helping hand.
so I went forward.
Yeah.
I got the discipline that I needed, you know, and the confidence that I needed, you know.
Yeah.
Long story short, but when I got out, I started going to Montgomery College,
Hmm.
the University of Maryland,
Hmm.
and through that process, in my early 20s, I I started to identify more with the Latino identity,
Gotcha.
the Latino movement, you know.
Hmm.
And honestly, it was incredible. I was like, oh
Yeah.
shit, like this is
Yeah.
fucking awesome, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. This is me right here.
yeah, this is me, like exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I found it.
look at all these women, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just dancing and learning
Yeah.
how to dance salsa and all this shit, you know, that really is
Yeah.
part of my culture. That's
Yeah.
but um but it is because that's the beauty about the Latino movement, the Latino identity. It's just
Hmm.
it's a huge umbrella, you know, and there's white Latinos, there's black Latinos, and
Yeah.
everything in between, and every culture is included. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So so I just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah, no, 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 and I appreciate that. You know what I mean? And it wasn't intentional to skip over that, but it was. I was trying to be respectful of your time, but I appreciate you sharing that because that's a really crucial part of your story. You know what I mean? And I'm glad that came back and filled that gap in. What I want to jump forward to is again similar to the question I asked about being a parent, but in the work that you do right now, like how have all these experiences that you've been through, like prepared you to be such a good steward and to serve in the way that you do, in the work that you do right now.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I was lucky, you know, I was lucky to like have met really incredible people in my life,
Hmm.
first of all. And I've always been good at choosing friends.
Hmm.
I've been blessed with attracting good people and then being like, and then knowing who to be friends with, who to choose as a girlfriend. I've
Hmm.
always had great girlfriends. And I
Hmm.
mention that because the reason I became a social worker was because I had a girlfriend who was like, hey, I think you would like volunteering at this this group called Barrios Unidos.
Hmm.
I was in DC working with high risk
Hmm.
youth in gangs, you know.
Yeah.
I was like 23, 24, and these guys were like, 15, 16. and I started volunteering with them. I was at the University of Maryland at the time,
Hmm.
and sort of just working in restaurants and majoring in psychology, and kind of like figuring out life.
Yep.
Um, and I was like, oh my God, this is fucking incredible.
Hmm.
I was doing mentoring these youth,
Hmm.
be a role model for them and stuff. And
Yeah.
I was like, you can get this can be a job, like this is crazy, so
Yeah. Yeah.
and and that's kind of like how I started, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I stayed volunteering with them for like 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
That's how I became a social worker. I ended up going to get a master's of social work from Howard
Hmm.
and a master's in conflict resolution from George Mason. So
Hmm.
when I came back from the army, I went hard on the
Yeah.
academic, you know,
Yeah.
like this is the way to go, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And and yeah, and that's how I ended up here. That's why
Yeah.
I'm still working with now working with adults for the first time, working with adults and
Hmm.
immigrants.
Yeah.
Saudi school, which is where I work now,
Yeah.
public charter school. But yeah, but that's how I got in, man. I got
Yeah.
in. It's like luck and just having good sense, good intuition.
No, I think that's really dope, man, because I know you from your current job, and I know that the students that you serve, majority of them are immigrants from all over the world, and the majority of them are adult immigrants. You know what I mean? So you haven't gone through, all the experiences, the lived experiences that you have in America. Like you're the perfect person to sort of be there to help guide them, help onboard them, and help, point them, in safer directions, and which will end up saving them time. What's that feeling like knowing that, hey, I like I'm helping, but it's coming from a place, that I also experience in a place of you're very confident in the work that you do because you've actually been through it yourself. Like, what's that like for you?
Obviously, it's a privilege to be able to work with families and children, going through that experience and kind of being a support, trying to empower them, you know. So, and I am a good fit for that role, you know what I mean?
Hmm. A great fit.
Yeah, great fit. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah,
It's been nothing but a privilege, you know what I mean? And I mean, I just feel so fortunate, you know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah,
Um, that I've made a career out of it, it's
yeah,
wild to even think about it.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I tell Joaquin this, one of the keys to life is like I look forward to work. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like Monday morning, I'm like, what's going on with this case? What's going on with this person? I wonder what
yeah,
happened. I need to talk to them about this. Oh, I gotta tell
yeah,
this about that. It's like I look forward to work. It's
yeah,
like that's the key to to happiness and
yeah.
success.
Absolutely.
It's not money necessarily.
Yeah.
It's finding something that gives you some passion. You know.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's been incredible. It's been great. I feel real lucky, Derek. Yeah, it is what it
But
is. It's always that element though of like, people who are social workers, people who are therapists, people who are doctors, people who are
yeah.
helping professions, 9 out of 10 times it's people that have experienced something hard,
Yeah.
and want to alleviate that for other people. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's something a little bit, off about that maybe,
Yeah.
but it is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah, man. It's a who feels it knows it takes one to know one.
Yeah,
And I think it's cool because what it is really it's also like alignment, right? So you feel like the work that you're doing is aligned with sort of, like your philosophy in life, who you are. Like there's a lot of alignment there. You know what I mean? You've had, you've gone through a lot, you persevered, you've overcome, and the people that you're working and serving, they're more than likely going to go through a lot of the things that you've gone through, and you're right there to help to just help them through that.
right. And I
Yeah.
also mentioned the profession because social work is a profession, that's
Hmm.
over 100 years old, and it's, you know, a lot of people have worked really hard and sacrificed a lot to develop this profession um, and I've been able to benefit from from that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's about helping people. It's actually a theory and practice, and and a licensed profession.
Right.
Where, here in DC, we have you have to be board certified and all that. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's really so I have to mention that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt, man. So,
Better that it's good that we have that, you know what I mean? 'Cause sometimes
yeah,
everybody wants to like help and stuff, but it's like,
yeah,
sometimes you have to go the professional route. So you make sure you're doing it well in the right way.
definitely. Yeah, no, no, I agree with you 100%. So
Um,
for you, it's I appreciate you taking the time out. You know what I mean? And I know this conversation is, I've been looking forward to just sitting down with you and having this conversation because I respect the work that you do. I know about the work that you do. I've seen it, heard about it, have known about it for years. So it's really good to just have this conversation and get a little bit more in depth about your background. So this is my last question, man. So if you think back to, 15, 16 years old, running around in the halls at Wilson having a great time, and you look at sort of like where you are now, tell me about at 15, 16, what do you think you'd be doing at this time? And then also reflecting back and with everything that you've gone through, do you see how you got here?
at 15 and 16, I um I didn't I'll be honest with you, I didn't think that far ahead, to be honest with
Mm-hmm.
you. Although I always had this like dream of bringing my family
Mm-hmm.
from Uruguay and Spain,
Mm-hmm.
Uruguay, because I knew in Uruguay they were struggling more, bringing them here.
Mm-hmm.
I always had some sort of fantasy, and it's so funny, it's so cultural, of like
Yeah.
opening up a restaurant,
Yeah.
having my family come
Yeah.
work in a restaurant that I own.
Yeah.
That was a dream that I had even back then at 15 and 16.
Nice, nice. Yeah.
That was so, but I didn't really think very much about my future back then.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
And
the second part of the question is like when you look back now with everything that you've been through, does it crystallize for you and you're like, okay, I see how I got here.
I definitely, I can't, I, I'm an overthinker. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying?
Yeah.
I had a lot, and I analyze things to the ground
Yeah.
until I don't stop thinking about things until I feel completely like I understand them completely.
Hmm.
So this, my history, my path, my
Hmm.
I have it crystal clear. There's
Yeah.
there's nothing I don't understand about what I feel like I understand myself and how I got here.
Yeah.
I'm very clear about how I got here, and I'm
Yeah.
clear about a lot of good things that I did.
Yeah.
I'm clear about a lot of the mistakes that I made too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I try to take full responsibility for my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Circumstances and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
So this is my last question, and then we're gonna wrap it up. And so a lot of times, what I do is when we have these conversations, it comes up naturally, right? Especially for when folks start going to school, especially if you're speaking a second language. Um, if English is your second language, right? Like there are people that you meet along the way, like some teachers that you had, maybe a coach that you had. So who are some of the people along the way when you were growing up that really kind of, outside of your family, that really helped to encourage you and just remind you to stay on the right track?
You know, um, my family really was highly dysfunctional. My
Hmm.
immediate family,
Hmm.
highly dysfunctional. So what I did was I just spent a lot of time outside of the house,
Hmm.
friends' houses.
Hmm.
So my friends were really like another family to me.
Gotcha.
Their parents
Hmm.
were kind of like people like you,
Hmm.
probably even like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my friends' parents were very influential, you know, on me.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my neighbors' dad. really sort of, you know, showed me a lot of caring, a lot of
Yeah.
love,
Yeah.
and um, that I really needed, that my parents
Yeah.
weren't giving me, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
for different reasons. And I was just kind of the kid, just kind of bounced around, just went
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
I like, and everyone loved me. I'll be honest with you,
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone just loved me. Like, you know, they thought I was great, little kid,
Yeah. Yeah.
Gabriel, you know,
Yeah.
always, I'm always having dinner at everybody's
Yeah.
house.
Right.
My parents calling, looking for me, because I was before
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
calling around, you know, looking
Yeah.
for
Is he over there?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Send him home. A la casa.
The way I did that, though, the way that I created that network of friends and their parents, that was a stroke of genius on my part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Coped, the way that I coped with my experience, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I
So
bet
it's a you essentially created like your own village or your own community. And
yeah,
back then, like neighborhoods were truly neighborhoods in a sense. Like you lived in on a block where everyone kind of was, you can pretty much walk into people's houses, I'm sure, without even knocking some of your neighbors.
right.
Yeah.
What I did is I just ran with that. So I got nourishment from some teachers, from everywhere I could, coaches.
Yeah.
I could name a lot of people, but I got a little bit from different places. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was enough, you know,
Yeah.
that was enough to propel me forward. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. So that's dope, man. I really appreciate you sharing your story, man. This is gonna be extremely heartwarming and eye-opening and helpful. You know what I mean? When people hear this story, man, it's going to resonate with them. So I really appreciate you, being so forthcoming and open to share it with you, with us. Um,
Yeah, thank you
'Cause
for Eric,
yeah,
and
man. So,
thank you for doing this. I think this is a great project
yeah,
that
man.
you know, it's I
Uh,
don't a lot of people doing this, so I think it's really smart. It's a great
yeah,
idea.
I appreciate that, Luis.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Stay in touch, man.